Hello. Hi, everyone. Finally getting started after all this wait. Well, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you guys taking the time out and coming to hear us talk. I'm really excited to talk to you about data-driven culture, the secret to growth and innovation that everybody's talking about at the moment. My name is Aamar Hussain. I'm a director at for data and AI within Microsoft Azure. I'm joined here by my guest, Stuart, who's head of engineering at Corp, one of our flagship customers. Just want to go over quickly in terms of what we're going to cover today in this session. First session, I'm going to talk briefly about some of the theory behind what it takes to be a data-driven organization, what the key ingredients you need within a data-driven culture. Why does it matter? What's the purpose behind it? I know it's quite obvious. You're probably thinking this conference in big data, but why does it actually matter? What's the purpose? I always like to try to get to behind the purpose before diving into a topic, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And then how do you actually become data-driven? What are the key ingredients that you need to have in place as an organization to be a data-driven company? And then what does it look like? What are the capabilities that you need to have in place to be able to run a data-driven culture and hence a data-driven organization? And then we'll talk with Stuart to tell us more about one of our customers in terms of how they've deployed and what journey that they've gone through to become a data-driven organization, and what benefits, what challenges, what lessons learned they've got from going on this journey. So first of all, why is everybody talking about this? Why does it actually matter? Well, I think, if you look at the key to any business growth, innovation, is data. That's the fuel that you need to have in place to be able to grow your business and build up innovation in your business. Data volumes are increasingly proliferating increasingly. They're growing at a massive rate. Data volumes and data sources. And so you need data to be able to start a journey correctly when you're starting off on a transformation. You need data to be able to course correct when you're in a transformation or when you're doing a transformation. And you need the data to have a digital kind of loop, feedback loop between what your end customers are saying and what you're doing as an organization to be able to be successful in the markets that you operate in. The second thing is disruption, right? So you need to be able to handle disruption in an organization. And the way you do that is by making use of the data that you have as an organization. If you look at how companies have adopted to disruption, it's taken, if you look at the last 100 years or so, the top companies in the FTSE, say 1,000 or 500, it's typically taken, companies have lasted for something like 67 years for the last 100 years or so. But that time frame has shrunk down to 15 years if you fast forward today. So that shows you that the time to adopt and the time to kind of change with disruption is decreasing every day. And the key to kind of achieving relevancy in that is to make sure that you're using your data that you have as an organization. And then basically, how do you actually go on as a journey and become data-driven? Now, believe it or not, one of the biggest challenges you have, or one of the biggest blockers in becoming a data-driven culture and organization, is actually not technological challenges. It's actually to do with people and the ability of people to adapt, to change within organization and the processes that organizations have to go through whenever they're doing a transformation journey. So the focus, there's capabilities, yes, you need to have those in place and what have you, but the real core focus of this conversation and this talk that we're going to talk about today is really around the culture and the mindset that you need as an organization to adapt and change. These are some of the key characteristics and some of the change that you like to, that you would want to embark into your organization. The ability for you to democratize your data, give access to your data to your various different, whether it's internal employees, whether it's external partners, suppliers, in a safe, secure manner. giving people the power or the kind of independency that they need to be able to take the decisions that they need so they can make those decisions, allowing them to experiment and fail and allowing that to happen. That's a key kind of characteristic. And building your own people up, taking them on that journey of growing them as they go on that journey with you. So, training people up, skilling people up, giving them opportunities to grow in the organization. All these things are really important in the culture, in the characteristics of culture. But the most important thing, I think, of all is trust. And I think if you don't trust, if you don't build in trust within your organization in terms of culture and what have you, then it leaves a big hole within the wider adoption of building a data-driven organization and data-driven culture. Now, in terms of and still you're seeing a lot of people, they're still struggling with this. Over 90% of organizations still report that they're struggling with business process change and the culture aspect of this. So these are some of the capabilities that we spoke about in terms of with the culture and the capabilities that you need to have in place. Now, I'm going to be a little bit biased towards Microsoft Azure because we feel like we have the depth of the portfolio and the width in the portfolio in terms of covering you from all the way from end to end, all the way from data modernization to building cloud native applications on top of that, and then using those analytics and insights to build artificial intelligence and ML capabilities, but with a comprehensive portfolio of data governance to go with that, because governance and security are equally important, if not even more important than any of those capabilities in there. In terms of the capability is one thing, but there's also a framework, a process that you need to have in place, which you need to build up. And that framework and process that consists of the business objectives and the vision that you set out as an organization, the culture that you build into your company, and then how you perform, and how you govern that platform and the capabilities that you're building, and then how also you build processes and leadership on top of that. So, there's the role of CIO, I feel like is a bit of a mystery for me these days, because Chief Information Officer does everything apart from looking after the information that they've been made responsible for. I think a CDO role is probably a more fitting role than the CIO role these days, my view. But that's just a bit of a scene setter in terms of some of the key strengths and views of what we're seeing in building a data-driven culture. But now, what I want to do is talk to Stu in a conversation to ask him a couple of questions in terms of what their journey have been in Corp in becoming a data-driven organization. So welcome, Stuart.
Hi, Aamar. Nice.
So, Stuart, tell us what was the drive, what was the purpose behind you guys on your journey to becoming a more data-driven organization?
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile giving a little bit of background on Co-op. I think everybody sees us as a retailer. They see the shop fronts. Not everybody realizes we're a collection of different businesses. So we range from funeral care, legal services, life services via insurance products, and a membership scheme that underpins all that. So with these collection of businesses, we've got very, very different data sets, very different domains and sectors within them. Historically, Co-op was on legacy platforms, on-premise and so forth. Each of the business units have got their own data strategies, their own roadmaps, and in operational worlds, they're heading in their own directions. What we wanted to do and what we recognized is the sharing of that data was siloed. Each business was working on its own. Where there was sharing agreements, they were slow, clunky. It was very difficult to leverage the data and move forward with that data in any of the businesses or cross-applying that data through the businesses. So we came up with a data analytics strategy. We sat down, sort of set out our vision, and number one was to create a unified data platform. In that, we wanted to make sure data was accessible to all users, break down the silos, make it available to every user, every team, every department, whether that be coming from an analytics community, data science reporting, and even breaking back into the ops world if we could do, but really close the loop using our data asset to drive a cultural change in those businesses.
So Stuart, I'm curious, how did you build trust and how did you get the project up and running?
I think what we needed to do to get that was build some foundations first. I think we had an ideology of what we wanted to build, what sort of data assets we wanted to do. What we did is work with each of the business units, show that we'd put the governance processes in place, security foundations were all in place, almost gain that trust that it's a safe place for them to bring the data, put the data, show how we can manage access controls through various different options to different teams, but really use that unified platform and unified data asset to allow them to go forwards, really.
And can you talk us through any use cases or any specific examples where, some of the initiatives that you've been working on?
I think to do this, obviously we've got some large data sets in the co-op. We'd like to get those in place first, but we're not going to gain trust doing that. So we started with a small user case. We work with our insurance business, so home, motor, pet, life, travel, different sectors within their own industry. Data sources all in different places. Some of them from accessible via APIs, some of them via file transfers and so forth. So what we did, sit down with those guys and almost work out their frustrations. One of the big ones was they couldn't get their data in one place. Getting the data out was very, very difficult. So we almost went back to basics with them. Started, can we get as close to source with the data? Can we overlay those governance processes to say we audit everything coming into the platform, everything going out of the platform, obviously the security controls as we mentioned, but we wanted to augment this with metadata management and building up a data repository. I think what we found with each of these business units and even the sectors within them, the data knowledge was siloed, kept to one or two people. Even in a specific sector of that industry, data wasn't shared and it wasn't common. So we chose Azure as our stack. We were looking at many tools in there. One of the tools that we overlaid was a tool called Purview. We was looking at some of our in-house tooling as well, plus Azure DevOps and the wiki pages. And what we started to do was almost build metadata for every single data feed that we was bringing in. Could we, instead of using file-based transfers, go for free ingestion patterns, one system to system, whether it be an API or a database, give us the option to self-serve, go and get that data out as quickly as possible, get it in the hands of the users. Obviously file transfers still exist, a little bit slower, but we even went into streaming capabilities and started receiving data that way.
We were talking in the background earlier on about some of the use cases. One of the use cases that stuck in my mind was how much savings you did on your waste of food, I think it was one of the use cases. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Yeah,
so I think in our early stages, obviously we focused on the insurance business, but we knew that wouldn't be good enough. Insurance were wanting to get access to membership data and retail data, so we started to run some small POCs with some of the other business units. Retail was a great example of that. So we'd almost created this platform, started bringing the data into this platform, but what we needed to then do was work with the teams, figure out what tools were usable for them. They all had different languages that they leaned towards, SQL, R, Python, a whole host. So we took a small POC with one of the retail teams, worked on an in-store bakery and hot food project where they were struggling for compute power in their on-premise domain. So what we did was lift the data out, give them the ability to access it, give them the ability to use the tools, work with our Microsoft partner in this example, and Databricks, and almost apply some algorithm techniques over the top. What we ended up with was a really good operational product that we ended up going back into the business, creating that disruption, as you say. And the guys produced something that enabled us, based upon store and segmentation, predict when to bake hot food, reduce that wastage. I think we've seen stats around about $500,000 cost saving in wastage, but that was a really good example of us taking something, bringing it into an analytics environment, showing that there's something we could do, almost A/B test with the way that they've got it at the moment, and then gain that confidence to say, actually, we'll bring that in and make that part of your operational day-to-day.
Fantastic. What are some of the challenges that you may have faced in? Obviously, as I said in my talk, technology is probably not the biggest challenge. I guess there's other challenges that you have. How did you deal with those challenges?
Yeah, I think trust was one of the big ones. Obviously, the more we did these sort of smaller pieces of work, the more the bigger pieces of work started to land. So we had a really good example. We started to get asks for bigger projects, bigger data sets. We were only a small team at the time, so we were conscious of how we scale and how we pick up these larger projects. We had a Teradata appliance, quite a large retail asset. It was around about 14 terabytes compressed, thousands and thousands of tables, thousands of batch processes, and with that, it was only a small support team that was looking after it. The hardware was end of life. nodes were dropping all the time. This small team were working all hours just to keep the lights on, let alone developing and taking that business forward. So what we did, we sat down as an architecture and had a look at this platform. The legacy of it, it'd been around for 10 years plus. The knowledge of the batch processes and so forth, they were really unknown. You know, we didn't know where all these data sources were coming for, and it was more a keeping the lights on sort of model. So we'd almost built the greenfield approach, where we'd built this new ecosystem and wanted to bring things to it. What we did with this one was look at a different pattern of ingestion. So we don't need to change those data sources. How do we get this platform into the cloud, part of this wider ecosystem? It was a big piece in the jigsaw, you know, bringing this retail data to the platform for everybody else to work with. So we took on a database emulation technique. There's some nice blogs out there that people can read about it, but essentially we used a tool called HyperQ with a company called Datometry from the States. The back end of that was Azure Synapse Analytics, and what that allowed us to do was forget the history, let this thing do exactly what it does. We would throw Teradata code, you know, at this proposal that would interpret it. It'd come out the back into Azure Synapse Analytics, and then we could source that into our lakes and almost open that data up to the business. I think what we did with that project, which was key, was when we started it, COVID had just kicked off. It was a real difficult time, but I think what was good for us, the remote working policy, it worked, it fit nicely with the way that we was doing it, and we'd already invested in the people. So the support team that was there looking after it, they were Teradata guys, didn't know any of the Azure stack, and what we tend to do with all our projects is invest with the people who look after this. Their domain knowledge is more important than the technical knowledge that we can bring. So we worked with them, brought them on our journey, and now these guys, you know, are almost that scale model that's allowed us to continue to build. We've got Teradata people that are now part of an Azure data engineering team. They're thriving, they're doing really well, and they're getting to go forward. So I think in terms of overcoming boundaries and, you know, gaining that trust, I think that was a real good piece that we did, and we've done that with other teams, data science and analytics, brought them on our journeys, you know, to upskill them rather than us come build it, walk away, leave you with something that you can't look after. It's more apply that governance standard that we did at the start, bring you with a tooling, open you to test and learn culture effectively.
That's brilliant. That's fantastic to hear. I think one of the key things is, and you know, we hear a lot of marketing buzzwords around mesh architecture and data fabric and data lakes, and you hear all of these buzzwords, but I think the most important thing is bringing your people on board on that journey, and I think you guys, it's a great example to showcase how you can train people and actually, you know, empower them to continue that journey with you, and I think that's great to hear.
Yeah,
it's great to hear.
I think that's been one of the key things for us. I think we've seen cross-team collaboration. So previously we would have had data science teams, analytics teams, data engineering teams. Yep. Now we're into this multidisciplinary mode where we're seeing data scientists do data engineering, data engineers doing data scientists, and it's a real cross-team collaboration. I think we've introduced hacks, you know, hands-on sessions, working with people on a particular problem rather than send them off just to do the training, which is really good. It's nicer to work on a problem collaboratively. Can we teach them decent engineering patterns that they can apply in a data science space?
Just one thing that I'm thinking, Stu, which is coming to my mind is when you're, because it seems as though what you're talking about there is more of a distributed architecture in your data platform. How do you deal with access and security for that data? How did you get the buy-in for people to let go, first of all, of that data, and then how did you get buy-in for the data to be shared across different domains within Corp?
I think having the governance teams and the data quality teams early doors, so every piece of data that comes into the platform is audited. We've got that lineage. We can show what access controls, you know, are on there, whether they be file-based access controls, role-based access controls, elements coming through as Databricks, Unity Catalog, and so forth. We sort of showed that to the business, enabled them to test it, prove out that it works. But really, the co-op went through a cultural change. We had a lot of people wanting access to PII information, needing access to PII information because that's what they've always had. What we did was take these people on a journey and show there's different ways we could do it. We could use hashing mechanisms, replacing with keys. You don't need to see a person's name and address. And I think from business stakeholders who own the data, that they got more comfortable. We had the ability to open up sensitive data or close sensitive data, but still allowing that access all data for the users and almost putting it in the hands of them, letting them explore it, and continue to grow.
Okay, I think we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. If anybody's got any questions to ask, we'll open it up for somebody at the back. Can we get a mic? 2 seconds, somebody will get a mic to you. Somebody right at the back over there.
Sat in the most awkward spot for a question. So I work for Boots, obviously another retailer. How do you handle the people who just want to use Excel? The people who will see all this and still go, but how do I get an Excel file out of it? What was your approach to bringing them along?
Did you get that?
Yeah, difficult one. We had the same problem. I think first and foremost, there's so many tools out there. If that's a tool that you wish to allow people to access data with, then that's okay. You shouldn't take the tool away from these people, but what we really try to do is educate people to say, Excel, it's a great tool. It does everything that it does. There are better ways of doing these things. If you wanted to produce reports using Power BI, having it automated refresh, you take the manual element from the user, needing to extract the data, bring it down, and so forth. Even techniques in other elements, we've got small apps running, obviously all the data science and analytics side, but really I think it's you sitting down with that individual, understanding their user case. Why do they use that? Do they need to use that? Should you be taking it away? I think that's really your choice, but if you could show them the benefits of other tooling or how working in a different product they'd get more collaboration from other teams and be able to do more collectively, I think that's the journey that we took most people on.
Yeah.
Building off that question, kind of on the other end of the spectrum, did you run into any challenges with IT when you were trying to leverage the cloud technology as opposed to the existing on-premise technology that you might have had before? And how did you bring them along that journey with you to enable you to take full advantage of that test and learn pattern you were talking about?
Yeah, I think we were quite lucky in that aspect. We work quite closely. We have the whole data department. There's architecture, strategy, and all the hands-on teams, if you will. Our strategy was cloud first. Could we do that? It's not always the case. PaaS first, could we do that as well? Again, not always the case. So I feel like we had an easy ride. They were heavily involved. We've obviously had to do a lot of migrations from these on-premise domains, depending on the size of the pipe, depends how quickly you can get it up there. The retail appliance that we were talking about, 14 terabytes compressed, it's probably about 10x uncompressed. The infrastructure that's needed to be put in place to do that, we needed to work closely with those on-premise teams to allow that. Fortunately for ourselves, we're an infrastructure as code team, so once we're into the cloud, we have the autonomy to spin up the infrastructure, make sure we've got the right test environments. But again, that's part of the governance process. We don't need to have production data in test environments. We gain that trust from showing code promotion done automatically rather than users in there changing things that might affect X users downstream. So really, end to end, the people and the governance was in place that give us that foundation to work, and probably more importantly, the freedom to test and learn and try some of the tools that we ended up with. There's a vast amount of tools. At some point, we had to be selective and pick those tools. 6 months later, the cloud moves so quickly. We could have picked different tools, but we're happy with what we've got. We should just continue to evolve, revisit. Is what we've got the right thing for the job?
Brilliant, good stuff. There was one here.
Yeah, thanks Stuart. I mean, it's been fascinating to hear the story, and I think the question is probably a segue from it's already been asked, and boils down to the foundation what Aamar talked about, that trust element, right? What's the typical advice that you could share? Because trust can be a broad topic, right? Do I trust my data in the first place? Do I focus on the processes side? Do I just get a tool to automate the trust element, or do I get those people involved who know that data? I mean, is there? I know this. You might be just off the shelf, but
yeah, I think it's difficult to answer. I think it comes down to the business. Personally, I'd probably take a two-pronged approach and show technically the capabilities that you can offer, but secondly, those governance policies? Can you have those people involved? You know, we didn't set off as just an engineering team trying to, with one vision for ourselves, trying to implement this. It was a whole data community, albeit from the operational systems that were going to be providing us that data, making sure we've got no impact to them, right the way through to the person at the end of the line, and making sure that they've got everything that they want. So we'd probably tackle it from all angles, in all honesty.
Thank you.
There was a question at the back. Okay. We've got 5 minutes. I've been just told.
Hi, good afternoon. What have you actually saved any time with these new processes, and what are these people doing with that time that they've saved? Loaded question.
Yeah, we've saved a lot of time in various different elements. I think the key thing that we found is a really good example, the analytics department. They were building reports, constantly refreshing them, you know, spending a lot of time and effort looking after them. The same with the engineers on the retail projects, keeping the lights on, constantly on call-outs and so forth. What we found is we've had the ability to scale, do more projects. The analysts have had more time to perform analysis, you know, get into behavioural changes and so forth. There's a really good example where we work with the personalised offers and CRM teams, external capabilities that were outside, we've brought in-house now and have our own CRM functionality. Personalised offers, they're working in modern tooling such as AML and Databricks. They've replaced a legacy process which has probably resulted in tens to hundreds of millions of revenue, you know, in terms of our sales. But really, with the time back, it's about getting people, you know, more into the stuff that they should be doing. Can we remove those sort of manual headaches that we've got and the operational overheads? And probably a point that we've not really covered is keeping the costs down. You know, with all of this, cost is at the heart of it. We can monitor and control the costs, keep an eye on compute, you know, and almost trade off it is that solution that we're offering, cost effective in terms of what we wanted to drive through as a business.
Fantastic. Any other questions? Final question.
Thank you. You obviously talked a lot about building a data-driven culture within your data-specific teams. I was just wondering how well you might have penetrated the non-data-specific teams, so more the operators and people like that?
Yeah, this is something we're doing right now with third parties as well. So sharing internally within ourselves was one of the initial goals. Where we're at right now is something we're exploring, actively working on, is how do we share with third parties out there, whether it be you know, another business within the co-op or somebody external to us and one of our partners. One of the big challenges we face is we're producing the same data sets to give to different people, lots of compute costs, you know, associated with that, and we're looking at a model of, can we put data in a place, can we control that and govern it and allow people access from other parties? Can they also bring data to the table, you know, to really enhance what we've got? That's a piece that we're going through right now, and we're looking forward to that journey.
I think that touches the CDO role that I mentioned, that somebody that knows how to take value from the data rather than just collecting it and storing it and just even analysing it.
Exactly. Yeah. So operators, decision makers within the business, not just the analyst teams or the data teams.
Yeah, and it's only when you start mixing those data sources up with other data sources that you have within your organization that you can then start building new outcomes and new innovative approaches and what have you to solving problems or competing or, you know, doing, you know, coming up with new products or new approaches, basically. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you if we come in, and thank you for your time.
Okay.